Welcome, everybody. We're about to get going. You ready? We're going to have a wonderful time here. I'm joined with some extraordinary women. We are tasked with a very interesting topic matter. But before we start, I just want to do a shout out to Michael and his whole team here at the Milken Institute to keep this issue alive year after year, because it's a very important one. It's a remarkable focus that he has here. When you come to Milken Conference here or Dubai, this issue about the place of women in business and the growth and the achievements they're making stays on top of the agenda. So from the top on down, this institution is focused on this issue, and I applaud it. I'm very proud to be here to talk about it. What I'd like to do, and the way I like to run these panels, just to let you know how it works, is I'm going to let each woman introduce herself and where she came from and why she's here. That's important. But I also do the task of reaching out on social media, knowing that I'm going to be joined with you and these remarkable people, and ask them what they want me to ask. And I've got some controversial stuff rolling here, okay? Because I think that collective madness out there brings some focus to this, because there's a lot of topics that often people don't want to discuss that are on the minds of the people out there that we should address. So it's no holds barred. I'm going to open it up for questions later. We have a bunch of agenda issues I want to get to. But let's start with introductions, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Current, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of, with my business partner, Merritt Elliott, who's here today supporting me, of The Great, which is a women's apparel and lifestyle brand, as well as Emily and Merritt, which is also women's apparel and lifestyle. And we also created Current Elliott and sold that a few years ago.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for turning up. I love seeing some men in the audience. That's a welcome surprise.
Very helpful.
We're going to make you money. That's what's going to happen by the end of this. So I'm Anjali Kumar, and I am the co-founder of the Justice Department, which is not to be confused with the Department of Justice. That's a different entity. We like to consider ourselves the real Justice Department. We are a women-led advisory, investment, and legal firm, really focused on women entrepreneurs, creatives, and executives, and helping them and some woke men, because men seem to have more of the funding, so we will work with woke funded men, and helping catalyze their growth. So really focusing on early stage startups when we're talking about the startup world, up to about a Series B. And me and my co-founders, I have two co-founders, and we come from a variety of backgrounds. I personally come from the tech world, so worked at Google, Warby Parker, Cheddar, which apparently just sold for $200 million today. Yay for me. I know. And my co-founder, JJ, she worked for Jay-Z and Beyonce for 20 years, and so we know how to build brands. We know how to make men a lot of money, including the Cheddar co-founders, and now we want to do it for women and see what the world looks like when that happens.
Thank you. Hannah?
Hi, I'm Hannah Scavarla, and I co-founded The Little Market with Lauren Conrad. The Little Market is a nonprofit store that creates market access for women globally. We work with individual artisans in over 25 countries. Through our innovative model, we help to provide. Sorry, I just got a little nervous.
Don't worry, it only gets worse.
I can tell. Through our innovative model, we create job opportunities for people in need. So we work to pay people fairly. We support sustainable, we support safe work environments, and we support artisans in marginalized communities. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here and talk a little bit more with you guys.
Trina?
Trina Spear, co-founder and co-CEO of FIGS. FIGS is a medical apparel company really looking to change the world and change the medical industry. So our mission is to serve those who serve others. Doctors, nurses, and every type of medical professional give their lives to everybody else and sacrifice their lives to help patients, cure diseases, and literally save lives every day. And we're the company and brand that's there alongside them as they go out to do that work. Since we launched 7 years ago, we've completely branded an unbranded 100-year-old industry. We've disrupted an archaic system. We've decommoditized a commodity product. And we've really built a community around a profession that was completely underserved and needed an update to the 21st century.
Debbie?
Hi everyone, I'm Debbie Wasco. I'm a serial entrepreneur who's built and sold 3 different digital businesses over the last 20 years. As you may tell from my accent, I'm a Brit, And business number 4 is Albright, which operates members clubs and a digital platform for kick-ass women around the world. We run 2 clubs in London, female-only members, but enlightened men very welcome in the building as our guests. And we're opening in West Hollywood in 2 months' time and in New York in Q1 of next year. Alongside that, we publish a quarterly magazine. We also, if you'll permit me, a very shameless plug, publish tomorrow our book, Believe, Build, Become, which is a guide for women to supercharge their career. And what gets us out of bed in the morning is a plan to build world domination through a combination of creating and combining profit with purpose, and to build a monster global sisterhood of women who can change the world.
Thank you. So obviously we have a wonderfully diverse panel, a lot of different sectors, different verticals, and that's important for where we're going to journey today. I want to start by making a statement of fact here as to why I'm so interested in women and leadership roles, because you should be aware, and many of you might know this, I'm an investor on a platform called Shark Tank where we support small nascent businesses and we fund them as they grow. But Shark Tank's been on for a decade now. We've seen thousands and thousands of pitches. We have a huge amount of data. And this isn't a game show where you throw mud at each other. These are real men and women creating businesses. We're taking real financial risk, and we're watching the outcomes as they journey through this very difficult path. It's not easy to lead a business and make it happen. So here's a piece of data that I think you will find rather intriguing. I do. In the 10-year journey of Shark Tank, and I've invested in over 50 companies, many of them have failed, many of them sold, many of them are living dead. There's all kinds of different outcomes. Over 90% of my returns have come from the companies run by women during that period. And the question that we're going to try and solve today is, why? What are they doing in these companies? And believe me, the diversity is immense. It's in almost every state, across every sector, from really high-tech companies to baking and commercial kitchens, you name it. They have returned a tremendous amount of capital. And so I am extremely biased now in these small private companies. I barely ever fund a company run by a man because my outcome has been so extraordinary. This is a big problem. I have to be fair and I have to be diverse. But I want to make money. And so at the end of the day, this is very risky. And so what I did for this panel is I've kind of set it up to explore maybe what the differences are in managing these situations. It doesn't have to be just a business for profit. There's many nonprofit or social issues that women manage, but the effectiveness is clearly in the metrics. And you can't deny it. It's extremely high performance. So let's open with a question. I want to run right down the panel and give me 3 things that you think women do in private companies, and I'll just give you the metrics there. The average size is 26 employees. The smallest is 5 million. The largest is $500 million in sales. That's the database from which I gleaned this information, okay, over a 10-year period. Why is this happening? Let's go. Emily.
3 words or 3 things?
No, give me 3 things you think they do that provide such extraordinary returns.
Well, I think women speak really, really well to women, and I think women have an enormous purchasing power. So I think we have a great, authentic dialogue, not only through product and service, but also through the marketing.
So communicating with a customer.
Yeah, I think.
So does that mean you only have to have product that women buy?
Not necessarily, but I think women buy a lot of products for the household. I think we've seen that. I think they buy things for children, for presents, for their families, and I think the purchasing power there really, you have to be able to speak a language that's not condescending and not only get people to buy something once in my business, to let them buy something or engage them month after month.
So understanding the DNA of the relationship between the product, the service, and the customer. I get that. Anything else?
I think when actually running the business, I think we mitigate risk in a very different way than other businesses that we've consulted on or worked with that aren't run by women. And I think we're actually able to, well, at least in my case, not spend money we don't have and reinvest and build businesses in a way that are responsible to us and the way we want to build them.
So you're saying more conservative in risk-taking, perhaps?
Potentially. It could be.
I see Angelina doesn't agree. What do you think?
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said. I don't know that we're conservative. I think we're just smart. Like we're running, I don't know, there's
All right,
nothing.
stick the knife in.
Yeah. All right. I don't, it's not like we're smarter than men or better than men. Like we're doing the same thing that other leaders do. We just happen to be in this body. And it's, I think, to try to draw, like, what are we doing differently? Why are we so special? It's not about that. It's just that we're really great business people and we're finally being given a shot. And I think that's the core difference. So maybe the reason you're seeing it, your data set of Shark Tank might be interesting. I'd be curious to understand that data more and what sort of the funnel looks like.
We're working hard on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fascinating because I haven't heard those sorts of stats, and that's really reassuring. But I think from the women that we are working with, the businesses that I've advised over the years in my career, whether they're male entrepreneurs or female entrepreneurs, they have more in common than they have different. It's just that the men have these structures built around them, they have the networks built around them, and they have the funding built around them that women traditionally haven't had. And now we're starting to change that. So people like you, that's fantastic that you're willing to take that risk and invest in women. And we're trying to do that for all the women that are these incredible entrepreneurs and will bring those kind of returns if given the chance. And if the men don't want to invest in them, I'm glad you are one of them. You're going to be on my list of people.
I do it for economic reasons. I'd give money to a goat if I could get a return.
I love it. I love it. You don't even have to go that far. You can just give it to women.
I say that all
we'll
the
take
time.
it. But I think we will bring those returns because we're just as viable business investees as the men.
Well, clearly that's true. Hannah, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that women are really incredible multitaskers. I think we're always expected to juggle a lot, and we do it well. And I think because of that, when it comes to leading...
So if you want something done, give it to a busy mother.
Correct.
The old analogy.
Correct.
Okay.
I also think women are really great listeners. So that applies to both listening to their team and their team's needs, as well as customer feedback. I think when women hear it, they take it really seriously and adapt as soon as possible. And I also think women are less likely to seek outside funding. So oftentimes it's their own money they're gambling with, and they have the livelihood of their family on the line. And so they take every decision very seriously and spend every penny really wisely.
Okay.
Agree.
Gina, I'm going to give you a little data that we mined, and I'm going to ask for your response on this. We went back and looked at the quarterly sales estimates over a 7-year period of all the companies in the portfolio. And what we found was, in the case of the ones run by men, they hit their targets 65% of the time on a quarterly basis with an average overall growth portfolio target of 30% annually, which is huge. And I thought that was spectacular. Then we went back and looked at the quarterly data over 7 years for the ones run by women. They hit their goals basically 91, 92% of the time, which is extraordinary, but they sandbagged it on growth. The average growth metric was 17%. Now, I want you to speculate what the hell is going on there that would get us better free cash flow as a result of setting that up, because we're trying to figure this out. If we can understand why they're setting very achievable goals and hitting them a lot, and then getting a much better outcome economically by measured as free cash flow, because in private companies, it's return of your capital, not on capital that you worry about. Why are they doing that?
So I've been on a lot of female-founded panels, and everyone's like, how many no's did you get till you found that you got that yes?
I want to know what they're doing. I'm not worried about the no's yet.
But this is why I think they sandbag. Because your question is, why do women sandbag versus men?
Yeah,
right?
Why are they doing it?
Because they're not as entitled, right? So women have been told no their whole life, and then eventually they get a yes, right? So then you're like, okay, I'm on the right track. And then you get maybe 100 more no's before you get that yes. I was on a men's panel where everyone was told, you just have to tell investors no. You're going to get a lot of inbound. You just got to keep telling them no. It was the exact reverse of what women are told every single day. So when you're actually entitled to something, you're like, okay, yeah, this business will fail, I'll start another one, I'll raise another 100 million. This business will fail, I'll start another one, I'll raise 100 million.
Yeah.
And who cares what I put on paper, because no one's really, everyone knows that it's not a real model. Financial models aren't real.
Yeah.
So you think that behavior is because access to capital for men is easier?
And
Yes.
they're entitled to it. They're entitled.
Yes.
And as
See a lot of
women, we're not.
agreement here.
And as women, we're not as entitled. We need to become entitled, because we are entitled to be at the table. And also 2% or something of women raise money, right? Female-founded companies raise money.
It's a little better. I have the stats. We'll get to that in a minute.
So once you are in that, so at FIGS we've raised $75 million. Once you're in that club of companies that raise a lot of money, you're like, I better effing make this work, right? And in order for me to make this work, I can't let people down, and I can't put numbers on paper that aren't going to be true.
Yep.
And so, for me, this company will be massively successful because I'm one of very few women to be in the seat that I'm in. And because of that, I'm not willing to have a conversation with investors, and I've had a lot of them, of well, you missed Q2.
Yeah.
What are you don't do what you say you're going to do. You don't have integrity. What kind of entrepreneur are you? And men are willing to have that conversation every single day. It's a financial model. 20%, I missed it by 20%.
So it boils down to risk mitigation. You're basically saying you don't want to miss those targets because it puts you in a weakened position in terms of
and you don't have the, and you don't have the leeway.
Second chance.
Debbie, stay on this theme, the sandbagging theme, okay? Is there something else going on in the culture that changes when you constantly hit your targets all the time? Why are these companies returning so much cash?
Well,
what
just to
intrigues
build
me.
on that, and I do think there is some really important context here for all of this conversation around returns and cash flow management and your portfolio, which is unusual.
Oh, you're speaking dirty to me. I love those.
Let's be clear. In 2018, I don't think I've ever sat on a panel before where the moderators told me to talk dirty to them.
Yeah. That's a first.
In 2000, yeah, always first. In 2017, only 2%, 2.17% to be precise, of venture capital invested went to back a female founder. On the other side of the table, only 7% of investors are female, only 2% at partner level. 1 in 6 women say they want to start their own business, but they don't do it. This stuff runs deep, and there isn't a magic bullet because it boils down to network, it boils down to confidence, it boils down to resilience, it boils down to expectation, but also that strange things happen in a room where men consistently write checks, right? It does. And every woman on this panel will have some variation of a story on what that feels like. And I think what we all have in common on this panel, and so much of what we profile in the books and we see in our building every day, are women feeling that it is really important that they are the outliers and they grab that responsibility to knock it out of the effing park. Because if we do that, and if we get rich and we talk about getting rich and we redeploy our capital to back other women, then we change the conversation for women. Because at the moment, I can count on one hand the number of times I've sat in a room and I've raised over $100 million in capital, I think, in totality. And I can count on one hand the number of times I've sat in a room and asked a woman for money. It doesn't happen. You know, it's an incredibly peculiar facet of all of our careers that our job is to be successful in asking men for capital. It's wrong, and it needs to change. And the way that it changes is for all of us on the panel and in the room and in the book and in our buildings around the world to make sure that we're getting rich and that we're backing other women to encourage them.
Here, here.
Here, here. Agreed.
Amen.
Let me dig into a little controversy right now. I'm going to throw it open to the panel. So when I reached out on social media to get, you know, from the great crowd what their topics would be, as opposed to just asking each other questions, number one on the hit parade by miles was this question.
I can't wait for
No,
that.
I mean, it is what it is. We might as well deal with it right up front. Do you think over the last, call it 28 months, the Me Too movement has really set women back in terms of their position in a relationship in the business environment? Has it hurt them in any way? I think everybody can understand the pros of this. It's justice, it's right. I mean, everybody gets that. But underneath it, what's the downside of what happened here? Anybody?
What's the downside of the Me Too movement?
Yeah, what's the downside? Has it hurt you in
That
any
it
way?
took this long. I mean, this has been going on for years.
No, but what's happened in the last 25 months? For example, many men say, look, if I don't have a camera in the room, I'm not going to mentor a young intern.
I have an investor who will not have lunch with me without a witness.
Okay, so how do you feel about that?
And he doesn't call it a witness, but I call it that.
A chaperone.
How does that make you feel? Is that a good thing?
No, I don't think it's a good thing because I think when you have a one-on-one conversation, it's very different. You're able to work through a lot of, more things in a very authentic way versus having someone who has no idea. Most of the time, the person has no idea what we do, no idea what our business is about. They're just there to be there. So I do think it's like a very awkward thing. That hasn't, that was even before the Me Too stuff, but I do think it's hurt in some ways. Like I do think that men are scared. That men are scared whether they've done something or not to, they're scared of women that are going to call them out.
So may I make a comment?
Sure.
Look, I'm 46. I have worked for, let's call it 25 years. And I'm pretty confident in my ability to say that I've gone basically my entire career without flashing my boobs at a colleague or sexually harassing them in a meeting or having lunch with a male colleague and saying something inappropriate. Like, I feel like it's not that hard. And it's not that high of a standard to hold our male colleagues to that same standard. And it boggles my mind that men, I don't disagree with you that there's like this chilling effect in business right now, but like, who are these guys? Like, do they really not understand that this behavior has always been inappropriate? It's just that now we have ways to call them out on it, and people aren't taking it anymore.
But
Like,
do you
we're just sort of
see
sick and
the
tired.
downside to what occurred? In any way, do you think it hurts you in your efforts?
I have a slightly different perspective, which is I see the entirety of the Me Too movement as being one of the singular biggest business drivers for the growth of Albright over the last 18 months.
I would probably agree with that.
So it's an empowering tool.
Well, not only that, it's been a business positive tool for me
Yeah.
and my co-founder. Let's be real. So what we're building are spaces that encourage women to network in a very diverse way, from women outside of their swim lane, every age, every stage, every ethnicity, within physical spaces and digitally. And it's garnered a lot of press globally, in the UK where we're from, but now in the States where we're rolling out the business. This would not have been front page news before Me Too.
Yeah.
It wouldn't. So I think that what we are seeing are the rise, and I hope the rise, of businesses that exist to empower and to build strong networks of global sisterhoods that buy and sell products from one another. And I think Me Too is an absolute catalyst for that, because we now have absolute talkability about what we're doing. Would our book have been published over 2 years ago? I'm not so sure.
So none of you are going
would
to
agree
say,
with
I
that.
wish this hadn't have happened, right?
No.
God, no.
Okay, I'm
It should have
asking,
happened 20 years
the
ago.
question the way it came down the transom, which I think is fair.
I would like you to tweet them back that we are all in agreement.
They're going to hear it.
Out of the panel. It was a good thing that it happened. It happened way too late. And I would agree with what you said, that I think it's created fertile ground for a lot of these ideas and a lot of women wanting to do business with each other, like we were talking earlier. You're just about the choices that we make with our dollars and really realizing how much that matters, and that we can buy from women-owned businesses and support women in these other ways, and that it matters.
And
that,
men should
you
be
know,
scared.
Yeah.
It's
So,
totally
like,
fair.
you know,
Look,
if they think
there-
twice about sexually harassing someone, like, then it did its purpose.
Yeah, I'm deeply okay with that.
99% of men would never, ever want this to happen in the business place, because it's just wrong, and everybody agrees with that. But this movement came on in a unique way because of the power of social media, and there's a lot of questioning out there as to whether it has done damage. But clearly, you feel, look, you take the lumps if there is any, but the benefits way outweigh.
I think that there's a difference between Me Too and Time's Up. Actually, without being too precise about the different variants.
It's a bit of a
all
nuance,
this.
isn't it?
I'm not sure it
No,
is,
it's
if
not,
you'll
yeah.
forgive me, because I think what Time's Up is about is solutions and community, and I think that's how many of us see the zeitgeist shifting, and it's kind of a different way of answering your question about why do women deliver better returns than men, and my data shows that they deliver 35% better returns on average, so slightly behind. Your portfolio outperforms the average by a long way, and I think it is because we are often, and in the case of Me Too and Time's Up, very solutions focused, and I think that's also something that's absolutely characteristic of entrepreneurs per se. You know, you give us the lemons and we make lemonade, and I think off the back of this, that's what we will increasingly see from something that began as something that, where the timing was important, but where there are different nuances to the conversation. I think for women, it's about solutions, it's about community, it's about network, and for female entrepreneurs, I think you'll see a lot of fertile ground for growing businesses out of the back of this.
But let me move to another topic, which is quite on the minds of large companies' corporate boards these days. There is a political movement out there to force democratization on boards by making the seats equal between men and women. This is not only domestic, it's being discussed in countries like France and Germany, and the Nordic countries as well. It would be a government-mandated rule brought down by regulators if it was to be imposed. How do you feel about that? I'd like to hear from all of you on this one.
Well, I think for me, the answer actually goes back to the Me Too movement, in that I think the Me Too movement was so long overdue and needed to be here. And when you think back to the statistic that in the United States, 1 in 3 girls when they attend college is assaulted. And that's just the number of women who are actually reporting. that shows you how just in college alone, women are already set back.
But how
Women
does
are
that
already
tie to a corporate mandate by a
Because
regulator?
then I think often those women have so much trauma, they're not able to finish college successfully, go on to their careers of their hopes, and so they're already set back. So I think that once women have equality and positions set for them already on boards, and people understand that they are going to be half of the workforce, half of the leadership, and are treated that way, then hopefully all of this works together and men will be less likely to
So
assault
you would be
women.
in favor of forcing diversity by
Yes,
gender?
I absolutely am. I firmly believe
Yes.
Okay, well, let me tell you what-
that quotas work.
Go ahead, go
Let
ahead.
me finish my point because I have British context to
I
this,
see
I guess. And so to just explain what happens in the UK, I think the only thing that has worked in terms of diversity equaling action has been a mandate that every company within the FTSE 250 must have a woman on its board.
a
and
woman.
they
That's
do.
not
A woman.
50-50.
But let me finish my point. So a woman on the board. And I think if you look at where we are around things like capital investment, and we just had in the UK a big review on female entrepreneurship that was published a couple of months ago, and to just show what those stats highlighted, a penny in the pound invested in the UK goes to back a business co-founded by two women. And there was lots of umming and ahhing about the what and the wherefore. And I think that two things that I would firmly support are an equal quota of women on boards, because I think that's how you change the conversation. And I would go a step further, which is to say I think that venture capital funds must have mandated that a portion of their capital must be invested in women, because I don't think anything will, if we're at a penny in the pound.
Here's the pushback from,
I disagree.
many out there. We're going to get to it, don't worry, but I want to put this out just so we get a little more controversy here. The greatest words of fear to many of us, including me, and I'm speaking this on my behalf right now, are the words, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." That brings terror to my heart. And that is effectively what is happening when you start doing things like this. If it's so true, and I'm completely committed to the fact that women are outperforming men, whether it's 35% or whether it's what's happened on Shark Tank with these family businesses, why are they not making it on merit? Why are we having, are you suggesting that...
Because we're
my
being
God.
held
Wait.
back.
Why are you suggesting that there is some conspiracy at the corporate board level to keep women off those
Yes.
seats? Is that what I'm hearing here?
Yeah.
The government shouldn't
that's
have
correct.
to intervene. I mean, all boards should be diverse, and that
Of
should.
course,
And
but
it's not
don't
happening.
you think the market is forcing that, whether it
Yeah.
be gender or whether it be ethnicity?
The market should be doing that.
But I think, again, the data shows that if you wait for parity to emerge, we
gonna be
definitely end up
waiting
in the
forever.
next
I think we've all
century.
learned
I will say this is a very militant panel here.
I'll push back. I mean, I think we all know that the government has made very poor decisions when they look to allocate our capital, as well as make decisions when it comes to the boardroom or the bedroom. So I don't agree that they should be making decisions about
Well,
either.
certainly not this administration. Let's be clear.
yeah, I mean, are you
Let's
really
try
wait
to
a couple
keep
of
it
years.
clean.
I know, it's totally clean.
Let's not bash
Couple years.
politicians.
I mean, I just think that the government stepping in or making some type of mandate, to the point that I think, I mean, the reason that I left Wall Street was to forge my own path and make my own way in the world and prove that women can do anything, right? And so, like, prove it, right? And the companies that will listen and put more women on their board will succeed. They will do better than boards that don't. And the market, I mean, I'm not, like, you can be liberal without being dumb. Like, you can. So the market will see those forces through, and actually companies that have diversity, that have more women, will outperform those who don't, and
I
that
think
will
that's
be
definitely true. But in the UK, before the Women on Board edict and before the 30% Club, which was the lobby group that pushed for 30% of representation on boards to be female, it was 11 out of the FTSE. Right, and then it was all of them. So sometimes you've got to give them a bit of a push.
Yeah, and we could just, but also we need to show up. We need to be better. We need to push the doors down, and we will get there. But having the government step in.
Is it fair to say that every one of you believe in a regulated mandate to get to 50-50 on boards? Do you really believe
I
that?
don't believe that.
I don't
You don't
believe
want that.
50-50, but I would like us to
Well,
start
that was
with
the
one.
question.
I mean, let's get one on the boards. Like,
So you
there's
want
not
a
even,
regulation that says at least
No
one?
regulation.
I would
Don't
love
most
for
boards
us
put
to
one woman on the board anyways?
No.
I don't know what companies
in
you're
America,
looking at,
they
but I
don't.
don't know of any.
Okay.
I know very few that are doing that, and it's so incredibly frustrating. And if I hear the pipeline problem one more time. I mean, honestly, at the Justice Department, the real Justice Department, we have a diversity goal as well, which is I'd really love to get a man on the team at some point. I'm hoping by 2030. But it's a pipeline problem,
If
and I'm
they
having a
push
hard
your
time.
door down and
Right,
they're
like
there, they've got to put
if they
themselves
can
forward.
find their way into my network, and do you realize how absurd that sounds, right? Like, and that's what men are telling us about it's just, it makes absolutely zero sense. The boards are done with like the friend of the guy who I went to college with. Like, that's how those board
But do you
seats
think
are
do you
created.
want to be on a board that you are regulated to be on?
You know, honestly,
Like, that's-
this
do
has
you think
worked
that's gonna
against me
work?
my entire life, and so I might be okay with, for a minute, having the opportunities that have been denied to half the population.
Oh, I would feel like such
For
a
a
The
little
shit.
bit.
reason that's a good
I really
question
would be
is,
okay with it.
Did you earn that board
Yeah, did
seat?
you
Yes.
earn it?
Did you
I
earn it?
absolutely
through-
have. I
yeah, but to the
absolutely have.
college-
Exactly,
Every single
yeah.
woman probably at this conference is beyond deserving of being on a board seat. I would love to see a show of hands in the women in this room. How many of you are on boards, on corporate boards?
So
That's atrocious. You made it to the Milken conference.
So I'm going
How many
to
of you are
say,
on nonprofit boards?
in this room,
There you go.
but let's take those one more time, because I'm going to report back to the ethos on this topic here, okay? How many people, and panelists included, believe that we should, and be specific to this question, I want to stay true to what was asked, how many think the regulator should mandate 50-50 on gender on corporate public companies? Yes, no. How many think yes, they should? Hands up, please. Okay. So we don't have consensus on this, and I think that's probably a healthy thing. Let's move on to another topic. I was intrigued by that because I was expecting a different response, but I'm going to get back to everybody, and I'm, from my point of view,
Probably
very happy
if you'd
to see
said
this.
at least one, maybe you would have got a different.
No, but
you know,
I
step.
wanted to ask the
Regular?
gender equality on boards
Okay.
question, because the fact is, when you look at the S&P 500, the majority of boards
Yeah.
have multiple women on them for reasons of political pressure and merit of performance. I mean, we all agree. But let's move on here. I want to talk about now, you're all involved in private companies of different sizes here. What we've discovered in a decade-long journey of televising businesses is the ones that were successful were able to tell a story about their journey on social media and on television and on radio and in print for one singular reason. And the way you can test this is, in America, 80% of businesses that are started today will fail within 3 years for one reason. They're never able to get their customer acquisition costs below the lifetime value, a fancy way of saying they go bankrupt advertising. When we dig and really dug into the data, we found out that the ones that were run by women had a culture of storytelling on social media that was acquiring customers for free. They were hitting the blogs, they were telling the story about the trials and tribulations of their families and their businesses, and acquiring customers by the tens of thousands, aided by the fact they had 10 million eyeballs on Shark Tank featuring their companies. But the point was, they were successful in acquiring customers at a very low cost. Mm-hmm. And that is what we think we've identified as the big difference between our portfolio of women-led companies and the ones that are failing, run by men. They have not figured out social media and storytelling.
I believe that.
Now, is it true then, here's the question, that this platform, which has emerged in the last decade, is basically really understood by women and not so much by men? Because the evidence is stark. It's just unbelievable. And are all of you talented in using it? Do you think it's a skill set? Where do you stand on it? I'm opening it up.
I feel like you have good stuff to say on this.
There's so much to say.
But please, you have the floor.
Yes, I believe women are amazing storytellers. I believe that women engage visually and like to support other women and like to support companies that they understand and that they're spoken to and engaged in a way that they feel respected. I feel, oh gosh, there's so much to say. So, I feel social media is really important. It's one thing of many. I feel personally that when I work in fashion and lifestyle, but that your storytelling has to come through in also your product. You have to have quality. You have to have.
Were you so engrossed in it when you were very young that it became just an instinct for you, and then you applied it to business, you understood its use better? What happened here?
Ask the question again.
So if you think about how you used social media when you were a teen, let's say, Because you're not that old, let's face it. You were using it then. It was around at that time, right?
I'm a little older, but yes.
Well, I'm trying to be nice.
Thank you.
So the point is, did you build that into your psyche in terms of how to use that as a tool and later converted it into something you could get productivity in business?
Sort of. I mean, my background, my business partner and I's background is styling. So I've always worked in a visual medium. I've always worked with magazines and with TV and with movies and music videos and things that were expressing visual elements and telling stories and building brands in that way. And so, I mean, this is before Instagram, before any of that. I think telling stories and being very clear what your point of view is and what you're delivering, what you're selling, has always been something that we relied on. Yes, instinctually, and we built it that way. So when these platforms came about where we could freely show what we were doing so clearly, not only from a brand perspective, but what's happening behind the brand. And I think that was a really big tool for us that really helped us.
I think that's a function, though, of something bigger that's happening, right? So I think women, I think the point was made earlier that women are serving other women. They're selling and having a service or a product that is sold to women. So for me, 80% of healthcare workers, who's my demographic, are women. And so, you know, in 2013 when we launched—
Are they the buyers of the garments?
Buyers, medical professionals, individuals, direct-to-consumer.
Oh, that they individually buy their garments?
90% of medical professionals buy their own uniforms. Actually,
So you're speaking directly to your buyer?
Directly, right. So, you know, individuals are buying my stuff, mostly women, right? And so in 2013 when we launched, a lot of the industries that men understood were already disrupted. They, you know, it's so far along in the age of technology and as industries evolved, right? And so the companies that came along in the last 10 years, think about Rent the Runway, think about Third Love, that's bras for women. Rent the Runway, that's a styling service for women. Figs, that's, you know, it's about medical professionals, mostly women. These were industries that were ripe for disruption, and men didn't understand them. And so Instagram and storytelling and community are all a function of women coming into industries and disrupting them where men didn't have an edge. They didn't understand it as well. And they didn't kind of do, and the other thing is, in going after unpaid marketing, women like making money. Men are okay because they know they're going to raise the next round. And so you figure out your economics earlier on as a female entrepreneur versus a male. So you're not just saying, oh, well, Facebook eventually will pay for itself, right? Women are like, I got to figure out something that's actually profitable. So figuring out, not that some men haven't figured out Instagram, but you could actually figure out having much better economics, obviously, on unpaid channels than on paid.
Can I just make one point, however, which is, let's not assume that women only found B2C businesses.
Yeah, agreed.
Because there's a bit of an underlying assumption in that. Because women found SaaS businesses, they found B2B businesses, they found any manner of different businesses where actually their ability, the fact that they've been on Instagram showcasing their clothes or messaging their friends since they were teenagers doesn't have any indicative impact on their success. So we should be clear that women can and do found any type of business. Perhaps with Shark Tank or Dragon's Den or any of those programs, you tend to get the B2C businesses because they're a bit easier to pitch. And stuff.
It's true, and that's why the lens is a little different than corporate data,
Yes.
probably why there's a difference. But at the same time, when you look at a decade-long period of the use of this, it's clear that some companies are using it better to acquire customers than others, and that is the singular fact by which they stay in business. If they can acquire customers profitably, it's pretty hard to go out of business because you've got a positive cash flow at some point. You know, let's go back to something you raised earlier regarding venture capital. These firms were founded over 50 years ago in Boston, and then they proliferated on the West Coast and now in Texas as well. There is a rainfall of fire and criticism falling on their shoulders now due to the fact that the LPs, the partners, are primarily white, rich men. And that is a fact. It is what it is, and that's the past. What message would you like to send to those firms that would incentivize them to change that? Because the fact is they've had extraordinary economic success. And so if you want to empower change in a society, you can try a lot of different tactics, but at the end of the day, what rules is economics. When you start to see, you know, and I'm just one example of a person who's changing their behavior investing because of past results, I'm not solving this for gender equality, I'm solving it for economic benefit for my shareholders. What message would you like to send to the VC firms that are now have more capital than they ever have had before. This is an extraordinary period. There's so much money in venture capital and private equity. Same issue on private equity. There's very few women that are LP partners in these firms. There are some. It was about 7% 10 years ago. It's about 11% now. That's not a big move, but there's no economic incentive to make this change other than political pressure.
But it's your point. I'd say two things, which is back women, hire women.
Yep.
That's it, because your point is exactly the point, that they haven't hired women, and in the main, they haven't backed women. But actually, all of your data and ours bears out that if they do, they'll get better
So you would like to
returns.
see them bring in more interns and mentor more women coming in? Because, you know, you want to join a private equity firm, you basically work like hell as a young person to learn the trade, as many as 3 or 4 years before you even have an inkling of equity in the firm. They don't hire a lot of women doing that, for whatever
No.
reason. Is that where you would...
Yes. Back women, hire women. Because also then what happens, as we all know, is that to be an LP, you have to have enough money to be an LP. So, it becomes very self-selecting that if you're not backing women and hiring women, you're not changing the conversation. And why should you do it for business critical reasons? Because women deliver better returns than men, and because diverse teams deliver better results. So I'm always a bit confused. I can see
That is a
structurally...
merit-based approach. You're basically saying, look, here's the data. They merit ownership. By the way, most of the LP partners in some of the oldest firms that have billions of dollars of wealth attributed to their owners now were created by the carry. In other words, if you had 10 partners and you split up the carry, you got the money. There were no women at the table at that time. If you want to get carry, you have to start now and start working, and 7 or 8 years later from now, you'll own 5 points of the firm and you'll start getting carry. So this is not going to happen overnight.
No.
But I also think, to add to that, companies need to be creating cultures where women can thrive. And I think that for so long, all of these companies have been boys' clubs where if you're expected to go out and drink afterwards all night long, as a woman living in the Me Too movement, you know that you were at risk for an assault.
Okay.
And so I think it really needs to come full circle where there is equity and women have an equal opportunity to rise to the top of the company without having to be
But
in fear every day.
is it something you want to mandate, or you want to see it happen based on merit?
I'd love to see it happen based on merit. I think a lot's going to have to change first. So if we have to mandate it, it's something I've never thought about before, because it's unfortunate that that's something
Don't
we'd even
think
have
too long
to do.
about that.
Yeah.
It clearly isn't popular as an idea. That's an issue. I'd like, I mean, it
Half wasn't popular.
Half isn't popular. I don't think
let's
people were
be
saying not
clear,
to mandate.
We're at 2%. So even
Yeah.
if we mandated 5 or
I know,
10,
it's like
it's
just
kind of
bring it on, yeah.
like this. Let's be realistic.
There's a lot of money to be made by taking women seriously and investing in women.
well,
that's the bottom
clear.
line.
I don't think there's any denying
So
that.
I don't know what it's going to take to get men to
What
do
we're really
more of that,
talking about
because
now
it's
is how do you
clearly
accelerate, given you know the data and the data is clear, it's irrefutable, how do you accelerate?
how you accelerate it is by getting us to create our own spaces and invest in each other and just make each other really rich. Like that's what's going to happen.
It's already happening.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
a lot of
that's
these
what
old
feels like it's gonna happen.
VC firms are really underperforming. All these old men VC firms, like look at the data, like they're going under, and more women are coming partners at them and taking them over and then starting new funds. I mean, you look at Forerunner, Cowboy, like you look at the new funds.
It's interesting you say that. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal this week, The Decline of Kleiner Perkins, probably the
I
most
read
story.
that.
There you
Now, you
I
know,
read that.
the assumption of their death is very premature, I must say. They have a ton of capital, but there's merit to what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think the other side of it is serial entrepreneurship. So if you look at Silicon Valley, where eBay money begets PayPal money, begets Airbnb money, begets Uber, like it's the same. So women need to create their own version of that. Back to the point, and the point of Albright is for women to get rich and redeploy their capital in other women, because that's how we create capital that grows and multiplies in its essence.
Fair enough. I want to open it up to the audience here. You've got some remarkable women here. What questions do you have of them? Yes, ma'am.
I think they're bringing you a mic.
Or shout it out, we'll hear you.
Oh, all right.
Right. I mean, I completely agree, right? Hire women, all of the things I completely agree with. And I'm wondering about this underlying competition that has been going on for centuries, right? During the witch trials, it was actually a lot of the women were the women who told on the people who got hung. And so I just think that's a part of the reality of the conversation is what happens when, or do women actually want to see other women succeed. And I think, yes, of course, and there's an undertone of...
That's interesting. You say there's a gender jealousy?
I would just love to hear...
Sorry, what's your name? What was your name?
I think you're in
Bea.
trouble.
No, you're not in trouble. I just like to address somebody with their name, like as opposed to
Bea.
Going down.
Bea.
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 Yeah.
No, you're not going down. It just breaks my heart that we're allowing that narrative to perpetuate.
Is that a narrative?
Yes. It is a narrative, no offense to the men in the room, created by men to get us to keep thinking that that's the case. It is not pie. It is not like there's a one piece of pie and everybody gets a piece of pie.
Well, your
and once the pie's
moderator has
gone,
learned something today.
It's true. It's I mean, it's such a dangerous narrative, and I'm really sad that exists.
Well, it
I
does
feel like-
exist, though.
Look, that there's men who are competitive with each other too, but I think there's plenty of women, and I would like to think that all the women on this panel would be that way. And a lot of the women that I've had the luxury and pleasure of meeting over the past few days at this conference that are extraordinarily generous and extraordinarily, like, I have this whole thing when I'm invited into the room, I'm keeping that door open as long as I possibly can. And I'm telling everybody, come in right behind me.
You're
It's
making
not-
it sound like women businesses are housewives of New York. It's not like that.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying they are not that. I'm saying that we are absolutely not just tearing each other down and like putting each other in a...
though. I mean, I think, I've been in business for 20 years, and there 10 years ago even, there was a lot more competition in my business. And I have seen such a huge shift of women supporting other women and aligning with other women and realizing that as a group, we mean more. We say more and we say it louder and we lift each other up. And it's been a real shift. And it's made a huge difference for us. I mean, we joined the Female Founders Collective and have been working with them, and to see women come together and help each other and mentor each other and get advice from each other, it's been remarkable.
Huge. And I think that Albright is so named because when we started to riff on where are all the women and what would it take to change the conversation for working women, we were reminded of the Madeline quote that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women, right? And then we had to put another L in so she didn't sue us for copyright over her name. But that, the essence of our business is that sisterhood works. We have it in neon on the wall of our buildings, in every single building. But I do think, and we get asked all the time in press, what about Queen Bee syndrome and don't women really hate each other? And, it's a kind of fairly standard question. I think what can sometimes happen, and it's back to your point on quotas and boards, and if there's only room for one woman, in the same way as if there's only room for one man, then shit can happen, right? So what we need to do, to your point on 50-50 and the sort of dissonance in the room about what we think about that, but back to simplifying the agenda, it's hire women, back women. Because the more women you have in the room, in the collective, in our buildings, in the community, on the panels, the less it is the case that there's only room for one. And sometimes things can happen when there's only room for one.
And it
so
only
do it more, do
happens-
it bigger.
Right.
It only happens, by the way, like that whole syndrome only happens when men are running the business.
Agreed.
Yes,
So
yes.
so where it doesn't happen is when women run the business, because I run a business and it's 85% of our employees are women, and it's none of that happens, right?
Well, that's a very damning accusation. We'll have to check into that.
it only happens when men are running the business.
It must be true then.
Yeah.
Okay, wait.
at
There's
the
other
data.
questions here. That
I
was a
have a
great one. Let's get
question.
another one right here, man.
Yeah, excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Got it.
Hi, I'm Chetna Sinha. I just have a question. Anybody can reply on the panel. This is regarding the intervention of the government. In the countries like India, and I do think that China also has this problem, on 1,000 women, on 1,000 men, if you have a less than 850 women at the time of birth, the government will intervene and say that, female feticide will not be allowed. You are not allowed to kill the child in the womb, and that is an intervention and law by the government because the number of girls is reducing. So don't you think that same in the board where the number of women is not only reducing, you don't even see that.
I hope you're not suggesting we're
So-
killing the board members. We're not going there.
Have a-
moments in boards.
Yeah, so it's a killing of the board member, right? Men, and have more women in that. I just want to say that when you're talking about the intervention of the government, it is not just killing my innovation, killing more, but bringing an equity in the society. So for a short term, Why don't we think about it in a short term? It's important.
So what's the question? Is there a question?
Question is that do you want to give a short-term time for the representation because
Oh, I
there
see.
is due.
Endorsing the idea that there's a mandate. I see.
There is a due.
Okay. Thank you. Right here in the front? It's okay, we're ready.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice, but thank you guys. I could listen to you all day long. So I hope they will do a Milken special females just conference in general. My question, though, is for Mr. O'Leary. So it is a for women, by women panel, and they choose Mr. Wonderful.
Yes.
Interesting.
They did the right thing.
Did you have pause with that?
No, I didn't.
Did any of the participants
I'm such an
have pause with
advocate now.
that?
I know I'm having some fun as a moderator, but the truth is, I have changed my behavior dramatically in the last decade as a result of economic outcome. And when I talk about this issue at much broader audiences, I want to make sure they understand I'm not doing this because it's fashionable. I'm doing it because I risk capital every day, and I have extraordinary outcomes. And people have to hear this stuff. This isn't, I am not in the camp that wants to mandate diversity. I want to mandate performance and merit. And for me, I am in trouble here. I don't invest in enough men anymore. This is a problem. I tell Alex, who runs my venture firm, listen, man, you got to get by. We have to make sure we see some deals from guys, because this is looking terrible. I mean, we're doing 80%. Well, look, I'm telling you the truth. I'm gone to the other side. I've gone to the dark side. I'm not being fair. No, but I get it. But I want you to understand where I'm coming from, which is why I put up my hand for this panel right away. I want to work with Michael on this topic for all of the panels ahead in the years ahead. One thing you should all know, when Michael held his conference in Dubai, or in Abu Dhabi a couple of weeks ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, the government of Dubai met with us and told us that they now mandate 50-50 in every government department, and the results have been extraordinary. That economy is on fire, and it's true. Many people don't know that. They don't boast about it, but they felt it was a competitive weapon, and it is, and the Dubai economy is growing at almost 10%. It's crazy, and it's fantastic. I agree, there's many different ways, and there's been a controversy about that, but the point is, it's mandated now, and it's 50-50. But let's get back to the questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. So I'd like to offer sort of a counter to the female founders on this panel. I work for my mother, who started her business in 1996 in the defense industry here in the United States, and I had her as a role model. I now work for her. And one of the earliest examples I saw as her daughter first and now as her employee, she never took outside capital. She built this business. It was profitable from her first year. And
because she couldn't get it, or she didn't want it?
It didn't even, part of her business model was, if I'm gonna start this business, I need it to be viable. The notion of, future returns, it's, I think, much more mainstream today, but that wasn't in the vernacular when she started her business. So I was very much schooled on that. And I think a lot of attention is spent talking about how we can raise money from venture capitalists. Like, put that on hold for a minute.
So you say screw them, just do it yourself.
Well, I think deliver something. So I'm now in the process of building sort of a line extension within the business, trying to bootstrap it within a profitable company, but I don't have we could go get venture money, but I have other advisors and mentors who've also counseled me on the fact that if you wait, every month you wait and don't take the outside capital and you deliver something incrementally more, the more valuable your asset will be and the greater your exit strategy or end return or your operating business will be. So I think that in general, this obsession with the venture world is something to be reconsidered first and foremost. And I also think that there is something very dangerous about mandating women on board seats. My mom she's run this business for 23 years in an industry that was almost entirely male dominated. Never for a moment would I want someone to look at her and think that there was anything about her success that wasn't merit-based. It would be, what would that do for everything she's built? And I think we need to take that seriously in terms of unintended consequences. You touched on it early, with respect to some things that are maybe bubbling up with the Me Too movement. And I think those unintended consequences will be very real. We've seen it in other affirmative action problems and things like that, that 20 years later have the objectives been accomplished. So I guess the question to the panel would be, are you taking alternative sources of building your business beyond venture capital seriously? And if not, why? I mean, there are certainly reasons to take venture funding, but maybe we need to change the dialogue.
Can I say something really quickly?
Yeah,
I've
please.
taken no capital. So there's a lot of ways to success, and there's a lot of definitions of success. So I've done other businesses that have, and I've sold businesses, but I currently run businesses where I don't. And there's a lot of ways. There's small business loans. It's such a sexy term, this whole thing, Series A, this whole thing. It's so sexy, and it's so fun to talk about selling.
We're at an investment conference, which is why I think you're seeing the conversation skewed to raising capital. But I don't think I don't know about that. I mean,
I think
we've had a similar
scale really
experience.
grow more quickly.
Scale
That's
the business
why.
to
There's
hundreds of
reasons
millions
for
of
both.
dollars.
But
and
her
then-
point is valid. The fact is, if you wait, you get more. That's exactly what
Not
Uber did.
necessarily.
It depends on what your
depends.
business
They raised
is, and
a
it
lot.
depends
So
on
many
your
ways.
trajectory,
That's true.
I think
how
it's exactly what Uber didn't.
Yeah, Uber raised billions of
I have
dollars.
a quick
For
question.
public
I think
markets,
we're
I mean.
running out of time. If you take away the
goodness.
mandated issue,
Yeah.
what could we do? Because I might have like 10 more babies by that time that happens.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What could we do in the interim? What could we disrupt to help women get on the boards faster? Is it disrupting daycare? Is it sharing jobs? You hire a husband and wife, they split a job where they work part-time each. What is it? Is it education? What else is there to disrupt
So much.
prior to?
Yeah, they're
So
great
much.
questions, and the answer is all that and more, I suspect. And I think that's the issue. I think there are some biggies. So the mean age to start a business is 33, and that's generally when women are having their kids. So there is a huge load of conversations to be had around shared maternity, paternity leave, which, I know in the States is an even bigger problem than it is in the UK, about the cost of childcare. And there's a very live debate in the UK at the moment, back to the point on governments and what they can do about increased government subsidy and tax breaks for childcare, because childcare is paid out of taxed income. So that's a biggie. It starts very, very early. With girls, if you map confidence, which is one of the big issues that drives entrepreneurship, but also the ability to do some of the stuff that people were referencing, pushing for boards, you see confidence drop off in girls versus boys age 7. So we've got to address how girls are educated. We've got to address business education, because to your point on your mum, it's a fascinating story. My mum's an entrepreneur. She's 71. She runs a business that she founded 40 years ago that she's never raised capital for. My grandmother, who died last year, aged 97, ran a chain of sweet shops and off licenses. So I've grown up in that world. I couldn't have worked with either my mother or my grandmother, so I applaud you. What's the point? There are lots and lots of different ways to do this. We're talking about capital, I think, because that's sort of the lens of the conference, but also because that is how you turbocharge scale. But it's very contingent upon the business. In my world, there's no way you could do anything that relates to property without raising money, because it's just too expensive.
Exactly.
But there are lots of different other ways for women to grow things. But I think, how do we change it? How do we change it without mandates? We've got to work hard, and we've got to really understand the issues that women face, and particularly face at a time when their careers often tail off, and recognise that women's careers aren't linear in the same way as men's careers aren't linear. So a lot of the topics we haven't even discussed today, towards ageism and what happens when women get older, and the next wave of women founding businesses in their 50s. There's a lot to talk about and think about, because it is different.
Well, we've run out of time, but I can guarantee you this dialogue will continue in all the conferences ahead of us. And it's a great one. Thank you very much, panel. And thank you for coming.